So we're back working on this 2009 Corolla this morning. We're going to go ahead with the timing chain and guides. So I've got OEM timing chain, upper guide, two side guides. Actually, this is the upper guide. These are cam bolts, cam phasers, thermostat gasket, spark plug seals, oil pump seal, cam timing solenoid to valve cover gaskets, valve cover gasket, tensioner gasket, new water pump, new serpentine belt, and new spark plugs. Got the car up on the hoist, got the right front wheel off and the right front inner fender skirt out. Yeah, I don't want to jinx it. I already disconnected the oil pressure sender here. Yeah, looks like this is a crank sensor here. That should be in the block though, that should be fine. I'm not sure if I got the gaskets for this oil pump housing or this oil filter housing. Maybe we don't need to remove that. But then the bolts go right through it. Well, let's get started. So the crank bolt is 19 mil or 3/4, and you can pull the pulley off with a little heel bar. The oil filter housing does have to come off, and it has two O-rings behind it. I'm pretty sure I got those. If not, I will get them. Now we're draining the cooling system, and I'm going to take the water pump off with the thermostat housing, hopefully. Let's have a look at the new water pump. So the water pump is actually bolted to the timing cover by the looks of it. The thermostat housing must be bolted to the back of the timing cover. This is the gaskets and bolts that came with the pump. Oh, and here is a look at the list of the dealer parts. And of course I got the serpentine belt separate, the water pump separate, and the plugs separate. Oh. So we're going to keep going. So remove the coolant reservoir. There are three little 6 mil bolts. We got our first casualty. One broke off. You have to pull this diagnostic connector out of the harness. There's a little clip here. You have to push the clip towards the connector and then lift up on it. Now we have to take this front motor mount off, and I'm pretty sure we're going to have to support this engine. I've got a holding fixture, but I wonder if there's some way to support it from the bottom. Sometimes you can put a brace underneath the oil pan, but we're going to figure it out. Well, little MacGyverish, but it'll work. This way I don't have anything up top. I do have one of those universal engine support fixtures, but it gets in the way because you got the crossbar on top of the valve cover across the top of the support. So I used a coil spring compressor to hook onto the frame here, and a pry bar chained to the lower control arm, and a block of wood, and that's lifted it up about 1/8 of an inch. So as you can see, the mount is loose from the body, so it's just a matter of removing these two bolts and then this brace, and we can take the mount off. So I took the nut, or the bolt, and the nut off the stud, but now I realize there's another bolt from the bottom. You have to go up from the bottom. It looks like 17 mil, and you need a long extension. Thanks, Toyota. So I was wrong. It's actually 14 mil. It's way up there. 2-foot extension. So there's actually a ground wire that goes from this cylinder head bracket. It's attached with a plastic clip to the motor mount, and it's attached here with a 6 mil bolt. So might as well just take the two bolts out and we'll clean the grounds up. Now we're going to take this brace bolt off. Looks like there's 3, maybe 4 bolts holding this on. So it was right, there are 3 bolts, but the top one doesn't come out because it hits this stud. But if you take it out last, you can move the bracket away from the block at the same time and just leave the bolts in the bracket. It looks like they're all the same size. So that opens it up considerably, other than these AC pipes a bit in the way, but Let's remove the water pump next. So there are 5 bolts that hold the water pump on, 3 short ones and 2 longer ones. The 2 longer ones also hold the timing cover on as well, and I believe it's these 2 up on the top. This is the top of the water pump right here. We're putting a new one on just simply because it's got 260,000 on it, and we have it off, so we're going to be proactive. Well, there's all the bolts out. I'm pretty sure I didn't miss any. I got to double check. There are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 17 bolts that hold the timing cover on. Then 4, those are 8 mil with 12 mil heads. These are 10 mil with 14 mil heads. There's 4 of those, and then 1 6 mil with a 10 mil head. And then of course a couple of the water pump bolts also hold the timing cover on. So actually there's 19 of these bolts, and they're all the same length. So that's kind of nice. I mean, all of the similar bolts are the same length. So I'm going to look for a strategic place to pry on it. Probably right here in this corner, or tap on it. There's a dowel pin here. There's likely a dowel pin on the other side. So you want to try to tap near the dowel pins so you don't warp the cover or crack it. But we'll see. So there's a strategic spot to pry there, and another one right here. So be prepared, there's going to be some oil coming out from the oil passages. I'm sure that's not the oil level. Oh, it could be, because there's not much of a pan on this thing, so that might be the actual engine oil level. We're going to be changing the oil anyways. Well, I got it released from here. Maybe I'll drain the engine oil out of it. Well, I made one mistake. I forgot to take the chain tensioner out, so when I pulled it off, the cover off, it popped off the chain guide, but it doesn't matter because we were taking it all apart anyways. And I need to take the thermostat housing or something off the back of because it won't come out of there. At least I can't get it to weasel past. Something's interfering. Maybe I'll look at it from the bottom. Didn't really want to touch this bolt here on the alternator because it feels like it's going to snap. I was hoping to leave the alternator there and just take the thermostat housing, but it's pretty long, so it may interfere. What a stupid place to put a thermostat. Okay, well, I see the problem. There's 2 coolant hoses that go to the top part of the engine attached to the back of that thermostat housing, and they won't come out. So I don't know if I have to drop this AC compressor to gain some access up there to get at those hose clamps, or, wow, not pretty. So I ran into another snag. I can't get this bottom bolt out of the AC compressor. You see how it's open here and the salt wicks its way down? I'm afraid it's going to break. I've heated the aluminum up, sprayed penetrating fluid on it. Well, we keep trying. Well, that didn't work. Oh well. So hopefully I can get this broken bolt out of here. There's the 2 hoses up there that we have to take off. I don't think taking the housings off is an option, because one bolt is here and the other bolt is up top and behind the engine block or bracket on the bottom of the alternator, one or the other. It still may not come out because of the alternator bracket, but it definitely won't come out with these hoses on. So we're going to undo these 2 hoses, see if we can get them off, and then we'll deal with this after. I had to pry this off of the broken bolt. I'm going to heat this ear up with a propane torch, try to get that bolt out after. So I've decided to take the alternator and the bracket off because that coolant thermostat housing interferes with that bracket. So I'm going to try to heat this with a magnetic resonance heater, because that little 6 mil bolt is going to break off, but I can't heat it too much because it'll melt the insulating plastics underneath. So I sprayed it with penetrating fluid so I can watch the penetrating fluid bubble. This is the challenges of working on rusty vehicles. Now this heater heats just the steel stud. Let's try and see if we can loosen that off now. Wow. If you put an impact gun on that, you're going to snap it. And then we'll need an alternator. Well, let's try heating it one more time. I got the battery disconnected, obviously. This looks like the original alternator. Like I said, I don't want to heat that too much because there's plastic insulators behind it. Oh, wow. Well, let's get a little bit longer ratchet, a little bit more, a better socket so that it doesn't round it. So I'm going to try this one more time, this time with a 3/8 dry ratchet and a pair of channel locks on the cable so that the cable doesn't turn. I don't want to break that plastic insulator in there. And if the stud breaks off, well, I guess it's getting an alternator. Wow. Oh my God, I don't believe it. Wow. Well, stick this nut back on the alternator. Okay, let's take the bottom bolt out. By far the hardest part so far has been getting this stupid upper coolant line off. I got the hose clamp slid back, but there's a piece of guard over top of the hose, so you can only get it slid back so far, and then you have to get the hose clamp or the hose to twist on the nipple, and you can't get in there with anything. These things are like 3/8 of an inch apart. Can't get behind it with a pry tool. I've been working on this for like frickin' hour now. Finally got it off. Let's see if we can get that thermostat housing out with the front cover. So I had to reposition the AC compressor towards away from the timing cover because that won't come out from the top. It has to come out from the bottom. I think when I go to put it back together again, I'm going to leave the actual plastic thermostat housing off and put that on once it's in the car. That's not that bad. You can see the water pump was leaking. That's the weep hole from the water pump on the other side. Wow, what a pain in the butt to get it off. Anyways, now I got to put tension on this tensioner and line up all the timing marks. I know it hasn't jumped because this side's still tight. Well, I did make a rookie mistake. Make sure you line up the timing marks before you take the cover off, because when I took the cover off, the tensioner, you have to remove the tensioner, allows the timing chain to go slack and it can jump a tooth. Now, the timing marks are not very clear. This one's supposed to be lined up with this here. You can see it's jumped a tooth. And this mark here is supposed to be lined up with the center of that according to the picture, but there's no timing alignment mark that I can see on the crank sprocket down here lining up to anything on the block. Let's have a look at the service literature. So that one's pretty clear. On the exhaust cam, the timing mark on the phaser lines up both with a colored link and the center of these two ports. The next one is not very clear. Where is that? And of course, this is the harmonic balancer lined up with 0. There is a timing mark on the harmonic balancer, but that's on the cover. Now I notice when the balancer is lined up to that mark, the keyway is vertical, but the engine's tilted back somewhat. Here it shows the engine straight up and down, but the engine is tilted back towards the firewall, so this keyway has to be lined up with the center line of the engine. The oil pump chain is we're not touching that, so I'm not worried about that. So I've got this one lined up, but I know it jumped. I heard it click when I was turning. I was trying to hold it, but it jumped. So don't see any other marks. There's an F by the looks of it here. I can't blow that up anymore. I'll look on another service information site. So here's another picture of the intake camshaft, and notice the orientation of the cam lobes. That's not very clear. Kind of lines up with the inside of the bolt and 2 paint dots on that. I only see 1 on this. And that one's centered with the oil passages from the timing solenoid. This motor specification timing mark is useless. It's just a 0 timing mark. Oh well. Rookie mistake. So I've taken the chain off and the phasers off. Use a 15/16 wrench to hold the hex on the camshaft while you remove this. There's a dowel. So I've lined up this mark, and there's a little bit of preload on it because of the valve overlap. Used 2 15/16 wrenches and a pair of vice grips. I wish there was a timing mark here because it just shows it in that spot, but this one is definitely in the center between these 2 oil ports, and that keyway is definitely vertical. Now what I might do is just temporarily set the timing cover on there and make sure that timing mark down here lines up with the timing 0 pointer on the cover. I'll show you where that is. Again, should have done this prior to taking it apart. That on that 0 mark, that's 10 degrees. Turns clockwise, looking at the front of the engine. So I'm going to take this plastic housing off because it'll make it a little bit easier to reassemble it after. And this is, I got to change the thermostat anyways, so I'll just put that housing on after the fact. Well, it was a good opportunity to test fit the timing cover from the bottom. You have to sneak it up from the bottom. You can't really get it down from the top because of these AC pipes. And of course the balancer just slides on, so you can see the timing pointer on the balancer and the 0 mark here. So I'm going to take the balancer straight off now and take the cover off and put my own mark inside on the engine block on that crank gear, so that if it moves I'll be able to see. I'm sure of this mark. I'm a little sketchy on this one, but they're colored links on the timing chain when we go to put it back together again. So if the colored link on the crank is lined up with the tooth on the crank as it shows, and this one's lined up back here, and this one's lined up here, it can't be out of time. So that's my opinion anyways. Now we're going to take it apart again and clean everything up. So I'm cleaning up this timing cover, and I showed you this coolant that had been seeping here. I assumed it was coming from the water pump weep hole, but it can't be. There's no access through there. So it's got to be coming from the gasket on the back of this thermostat housing. Now I did buy that gasket, believe it or not. I'm pretty sure that's it there. So we're going to take this off and clean it up and reseal it as well. Yeah. So there's the timing cover all cleaned up. Got to remember to put RTV sealant around this spot here on the engine, on the block. I'm going to put the sealant on the block, that way I'm not going to take a chance of smudging it when I put this cover up in there. You got to look at where it goes, so your sealant's going to go around the outside, around the inside of the bolt holes. And new gasket here and a new balancer seal. Pack the inside of the seal with grease so the garter spring doesn't pop off when you're tapping the seal in. I tapped it in flush with the cover. There is another seal right here. I'm just going to put a little bit of RTV sealant on the bolt. I think that's just to keep the oil from migrating up the head of the bolt. No big deal. There was a couple of O-rings on the engine block. I think one here and one here. Got to make sure that those are in place. Okay, installing the phasers, the cam sprockets. The torque on the bolts, if you're using the bolt itself and not a service tool, is 40 foot-pounds. Hold the camshaft so it doesn't rotate. This wrench is pretty, there we go, sloppy. Same thing with this one. Let's take this wrench off here and put it on here. New bolts too are recommended. Now we'll line up those timing marks and clamp the wrenches together again. So loosely hang the chain on there. This color link goes on that timing mark. These two colored links spread this timing mark. And the one down at the bottom down here on the crank is a dot. Now we'll put the guides in. So I got the chain installed and the guides. These two bolts on this front guide are 16 foot-pounds. I put an elastic band to hold the chain tensioner side up against the chain,
because otherwise it falls down and it's going to get in the way when I'm putting the timing cover on and putting silicone on there. And I'll just cut that elastic band and pull it out of there from the top. Now I ran into a problem. There's 3 O-rings between the timing cover and the engine block. Here they are here. They're oil passages. And although I ordered them, they didn't give them to me. Now, I might not have ordered the 2 O-rings for the oil pump housing or the oil filter housing, which are these 2 here. But those are on the outside. It looks like that one's the same as one of those. So I'm going to see if I've got some O-rings that'll work in this position here. So I managed to find an O-ring, an R10 metric, and an R12 metric. I measured these ones. They're compressed, squashed, and they're about 75 thou, and these ones are, or these new ones are like 95 thou. So 20 to 25 thou compression should be good. They seem to fit in there okay, so we're going to put the timing cover back on.